Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Masterflow Plumbing YouTube channel, where it is our goal and our mission to help teach you, the average homeowner, some basic plumbing repairs that you can accomplish around the home yourself. Before you do attempt to do any of this though, we would like to remind you that plumbing can be a dangerous activity and can cause personal injury and or property damage. So before you attempt to do any of this, please read our full disclaimer down here in the description box. While you're down there, please go ahead and click the subscribe button and the like button, as it does help us tremendously to keep bringing you this useful content. Today's video is going to be about a Febco 765 backflow preventer and how to rebuild it. Today's video is actually being shot in our shop, so this is not a live backflow preventer. This is a brand new one waiting to be installed at a customer's house. However, for today's demonstration, we can actually tell you everything you need to know about this device while it's sitting right here in my vise on my bench. So the first thing we're going to tell you about is what it does. If you have a sprinkler system on your house, which a lot of houses have nowadays so they can keep their grass looking good, you're going to have a device like this that protects the public water supply, whether that be your well or city water. This device protects the water supply system from cross-contamination from your yard. The easiest way, the most common way I like to explain this to my customers when they ask, why do I have to have this device on my house? Why do I have to have this big ugly looking brass thing on the side of my house? Well, it's important. So I'm going to give you a scenario, and it's probably the most likely scenario as to why these devices are there. Let's just say you are on a city water system and you're watering your lawn daily, and you have your lawn fertilized one day. Well, a couple hours after it gets fertilized, it starts to rain. You have a real heavy downpour. And let's just say, for demonstration purposes, that somewhere in your yard, one of your sprinkler heads is actually kind of recessed down in the ground, and now that it's rained, there's a puddle that has formed around that sprinkler head, and it's full of chemicals from just having your lawn fertilized. Meanwhile, neighbor's house catches on fire. Fire department shows up, hooks onto the closest fire hydrant. When they do that, it actually draws all the water pressure. It drops the water pressure in the whole neighborhood in most cases. And when that happens, it can actually begin to siphon back from homes. And when it does that, it can actually pull that water all the way back into the city water system. Well, we don't want any poisonous chemicals, fertilizers. There's other things. Another common thing would be boiler systems, that are used for heating homes and commercial buildings. A lot of times those systems have glycol, which is antifreeze. It actually has glycol in the system, which is very poisonous for human beings and for pets. So we don't want that stuff getting onto our water. So what happens when the water pressure drops on the supply side of one of these devices? There's a check valve that is held open by the water pressure. And when that water pressure drops, it allows that check valve to close so that any water coming back in here from your sprinkler system cannot enter back into the home. On top of that, this has a second layer of protection. It has what they call an air inlet. Okay, and the air inlet is actually just a fancy way of saying that once that check valve closes, that water that's getting siphoned back is allowed to spill out from underneath the top of this bell-shaped canopy right here. These devices are required to be installed. This particular one is called a pressure vacuum breaker, and if you're going to have one of these on your home or your building, it has to be installed 12 inches above the highest sprinkler head. That is an international plumbing code, and is also a rule from the ASSE. So let's begin on how to take this device apart and make a repair on it. First thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have your safety glasses on, like I already have mine. And you're going to want to go ahead and you're going to want to shut that valve off right there. You might as well go ahead and shut this one off too. So you're going to shut both of those valves off, and at that point you can go ahead and work on this device. I will recommend that through one of these test ports right here, that you go ahead and use a screwdriver and you open that up 90 degrees right there, and that will take the pressure off of this device, and it will let some water out right there so you don't get poof in your face when you go to take it apart. So the way we're going to take this apart is we're going to use a 7/16 open-end wrench, or if you don't have that, you can actually just use a pair of channel locks or tongue and groove pliers, as we like to call them. And you're going to go ahead and take this nut off the top of here, like this. Don't lose it, because we're going to put it back. We're going to set that down somewhere safe. And in your case, you're going to likely be in a grassy yard, so make sure you know where you set that. You don't want to lose it. We're going to pull that off of the top of here. And at that point, it's going to expose basically the guts of this device. Okay, this particular device is going to be real easy because it's brand new. You may run into some trouble taking yours apart, or you may not. These plastic pieces can become brittle with age, so be aware of that. So the way these come apart is actually pretty simple. Once we've taken that dome-shaped top off of there, we're actually going to just kind of grab a hold of it, and we're going to try to give it a turn. Okay, this one you can see is a little bit too tight to try to take off by hand. So a lot of times what I do is I gently take a screwdriver, put it in here like this, just to give myself a little leverage, just like that, so I can break it free. If you break the plastic, don't worry about it, because you're going to replace these parts, remember? So at that point, once we have it loose, we're going to go ahead and we're going to unscrew this the rest of the way. And then that comes out of there like that. This comes out of there like that. And these are the two main components that usually need to get replaced, because this is the disc that makes the seal. And then there is actually the spring that I was talking about that actually keeps that actually open when the water pressure's on. If you look down inside of here, there is actually another component. The piece comes out of here, and then there is also a spring. And then here is the actual check valve that gets held open by the water pressure and closes when the water pressure drops on the supply side. So your Febco repair kit is going to come with these pieces here. It's going to come with that spring, and it's going to come with that. Some of them in the past have came with this piece too. If it doesn't, no big deal. You should be able to reuse that. So this kit will come as one, and you're going to basically put it back together in reverse order. Before you begin, though, you want to make sure that down inside of this, that this surface right down inside of here, let me see if I can show you that with my screwdriver. This surface that's right around here, you want to make sure that there's no pits or damage to that in any way, shape, or form, and you don't want to make sure there's no dirt in there. I've got a couple specks in there on a brand new device. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our brand new parts, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this back together in reverse order. Take your time, make sure you get it in there correctly, because those little 4 posts have to fit inside that hole, and it can be tricky. Okay, so that's in there like that. We're going to put our spring back in, and then we're going to take this, which is also very tricky, put it on an angle, push down on that spring, and then turn it until it is in the correct position, just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the other 2 pieces here, and it's easiest to usually just go ahead and get that started right there, and then do that, push down on it a little bit, and begin to tighten it in. Now make sure that you get it started correctly. You don't want to cross thread it. It is plastic going into brass, so it's real easy to do. And you also want to make sure, let me take this back off and show you. You also want to make sure that this O-ring right here, this black O-ring, you want to make sure that you don't pinch it or damage it. If you have some plumber's grease laying around, it's not a bad idea to put a little bit of that around that O-ring to keep it nice and soft and supple so it doesn't dry up and begin to leak on you next year. It also helps so these threads next time can come apart a little easier. Put a little plumber's grease on those. For demonstrations today, we're not going to do that. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of get it started and get it back in there the correct way. We're going to go ahead and I always just tighten these by hand, just like this, until I get it nice and tight. And usually before I go ahead and put the canopy on, I will go ahead and turn the water back on so I can see exactly what's going on inside of here. So before you do that, you're going to want to close your test port that you open to relieve some of the pressure. You can go ahead and put your little cap back on there if you have one. At that point, you will go ahead and you will turn the water back on the supply side. You can go ahead and leave that off for right now. You're going to turn that on. When you do, this thing's going to go pop, and it's going to dump a little bit of water out of there. Not much, just a little bit. If you've put it back together correctly, it will only be a little bit of water. If you see a lot of water, it's not going to, you did something wrong. If you do see that, go ahead and just shut it back off and go back through the steps again until you do get it correctly. Once you know that you've actually had it back together correctly and you do have this seated up properly, you can go ahead and turn the water back on to your sprinkler system by opening up this other valve, which does usually go down into the ground like that and feed your sprinklers. At that point, you can go ahead and put your little dome cover back on here and put the nut back on there, and you can tighten that back down. Whoop. we'll use our little gear wrench here. And we'll go ahead and tighten that back down. Okay, so that concludes our video on how to repair a Febco 765 1-inch backflow preventer that is most commonly used for sprinkler system. Now there are other brands of these devices out there. More other common ones will be Watts. There's also Wilkins. There's Cambraco or Apollo. Those devices are not as commonly used for residential sprinkler systems. However, they are out there, and we may go ahead and do some videos on some of those as they come up. So with that, we'd like to say thank you for joining us for today's video, and we'd like to go ahead and remind you to please look at our disclaimer in the description box down there below. And while you're there, please click subscribe and like this video so that we can continue to bring you this useful content. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.